Indian billionaire hires a housekeeper to care for his daughter, but starts to notice strange behavior in the child. When he discovers the housekeeper's secret, his life changes forever. Welcome to Billionaires and Hearts. Before we dive into today's emotional journey, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell to stay updated. We'd love to hear your first impressions, so drop a comment below and let us know what you think as you watch. And if you enjoy our stories, please like and share this video with your friends. Now let's get started. The sound of tiny footsteps echoing through the marble halls of the mansion stopped abruptly. Bharat Malhotra looked up from his laptop, his heart skipping a beat at the unusual silence. His daughter Hamida had been running and playing just moments ago, her laughter filling the empty spaces of their luxurious but lonely home. "Hamida," he called out, rising from his desk. No response. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Bharat hurried down the hallway, his perfectly polished shoes clicking against the floor. The mansion felt too big, too empty in these moments. Since losing his wife, he'd thrown himself into his work, building his technology empire into one of India's most successful companies. But none of that mattered when his daughter went quiet like this. He found Hamida in the kitchen, standing perfectly still, staring at the wall. Her small frame was rigid, her usually bright eyes distant and unfocused. It was happening again. "Beta," he whispered, using the tender Hindi term for child. Hamida didn't respond, didn't even blink. These episodes had been occurring more frequently, and none of the doctors could explain why. His vibrant, cheerful daughter would simply disconnect. The sound of keys in the front door broke the moment. Isabella Martinez, their new housekeeper, walked in carrying grocery bags. She took in the scene instantly, the worried father, the motionless child, and something flickered across her face. Recognition, understanding. Before Bharat could process it, the expression was gone. "Mr. Malhotra," Isabella said softly, setting down the bags. She moved toward Hamida with a confidence that surprised him. Kneeling beside the child, she began humming a gentle melody. Slowly, like ice melting in the sun, Hamida's rigid posture softened, her eyes focused, and she turned toward the sound. "Isabella," Hamida whispered, as if waking from a dream. Then, more normally, "You got the special cookies I asked for." Bharat watched in amazement as his daughter transformed back into herself, chatting animatedly with Isabella about groceries as if nothing had happened. The housekeeper caught his questioning gaze and quickly looked away, busying herself with unpacking the bags. That evening, after putting Hamida to bed, Bharat found Isabella in the kitchen, preparing the next day's meals. She'd only been with them for a few weeks, but already the house felt different, warmer somehow despite her quiet and reserved nature. "How did you know what to do?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "I was with Hamida earlier." Isabella's hands stilled over the vegetables she was chopping. "I've worked with children before," she said carefully, not meeting his eyes. "No," Bharat pressed, stepping into the kitchen. "That was different. You knew exactly how to bring her back. None of the doctors, none of the other housekeepers." He trailed off, studying her profile in the warm kitchen light. "Who are you really, Isabella Martinez?" She set down the knife, finally turning to face him. In her eyes, he saw a depth of understanding that both intrigued and unsettled him. "Mr. Malhotra, there are some things that—" A scream from upstairs cut through the air. Hamida. They both ran, taking the stairs two at a time, but when they reached Hamida's room, they found it empty. The window open to the cool night air, curtains billowing in the breeze. On the perfectly made bed lay a single note, its message sending chills down Bharat's spine. "She needs the treatment. We can help her. Don't try to find us." Isabella's sharp intake of breath beside him carried a weight of recognition that told Bharat she knew far more than she'd let on. As he turned to confront her, his world crumbling around him, he realized this was only the beginning of a mystery that would change all their lives forever. "Tell me everything. Now!" Bharat's voice trembled with barely controlled rage as he faced Isabella in his study. Outside, police sirens wailed in the distance, racing toward the mansion. But Isabella knew they wouldn't find anything. Whoever had taken Hamida knew exactly what they were doing. Isabella sank into a chair, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. "Your daughter has a rare condition," she began, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "I know because my sister had the same symptoms." Bharat's anger faltered, replaced by desperate hope. Had. Isabella's voice caught. "She didn't make it. But that's why I'm here. When I saw the job posting, saw the description of Hamida's episodes, I knew I had to help. I couldn't save my sister, but maybe I could save your daughter." The study filled with a heavy silence, broken only by the ticking of an antique clock, a wedding gift from Bharat's late wife. His world had already shattered once when he lost her. Now, watching Isabella's face in the dim light, he saw the same pain he'd carried mirrored in her eyes. "The people who took her," Isabella continued, "they're part of a private medical research group. They approached my family 2 years ago. They claimed they had a treatment, experimental but promising. We couldn't afford it then." Her hands clenched in her lap. By the time we found other options, it was too late. Bharat leaned against his desk, his legs weak. "Why didn't you tell me this before? Would you have believed me? A housekeeper claiming to know more about your daughter's condition than all your expensive doctors." She met his gaze directly. "Besides, I needed to be sure. The symptoms can look similar to other conditions. But today, when I saw her in the kitchen, I knew." The door burst open as Hari, Bharat's trusted driver and assistant, rushed in. "Sir, the police are here." And he hesitated, glancing at Isabella. "And what?" Bharat demanded. "Your mother is here. Anjali Ji is quite upset." As if on cue, Anjali's voice rang through the hallway, speaking rapid-fire Hindi mixed with English. "Where is my granddaughter? And why was she left alone with that woman?" Isabella stood, squaring her shoulders. "I should go." "No." Bharat's hand caught her wrist, surprising them both with the contact. "You're the only one who knows anything about this condition. You're not going anywhere." Anjali swept into the study, her silk sari rustling with her agitated movements. Her eyes narrowed at the sight of Bharat still holding Isabella's wrist. He released it quickly, but not before his mother's disapproving look burned into both of them. "The police need to speak with everyone," Anjali announced, her accent thickening with stress. "Especially the housekeeper." "Her name is Isabella," Bharat said quietly, "and she stays with me." The next hours passed in a blur of police questions, phone calls, and mounting tension. Bharat watched as Isabella answered every question with a calm precision that spoke of her intelligence and education, clearly more extensive than her current position suggested. She provided details about the medical research group, though she admitted she didn't know their current location. As the night deepened, the police finally left, promising to put their best detectives on the case. Anjali retreated to one of the guest rooms, but not before pulling Bharat aside. "Beta," she warned in Hindi, "don't let your grief cloud your judgment. We know nothing about this woman." But Bharat knew enough. He'd seen the genuine pain in Isabella's eyes when she spoke of her sister, recognized the desperate need to prevent another family from experiencing the same loss. After everyone else had gone, he found her in Hamida's room, gently touching the stuffed elephant his daughter slept with every night. "We'll find her," Isabella whispered, not turning around. "I promise you." "How can you be so sure?" Now she did turn, and the determination in her expression took his breath away. "Because this time is different. You have resources my family didn't have, and—" She hesitated, then forged ahead. "You have me. I've spent years researching this condition, gathering information, making connections. I became a housekeeper because it let me move between families, looking for cases like Hamida's. You're not really a housekeeper at all, are you?" A small, sad smile crossed her face. "I was a medical student before my sister got sick. I left school to care for her, to try to find answers. After she died, I couldn't go back. This became my life's work instead." Bharat studied her in the moonlight streaming through the window. In that moment, she wasn't his employee, she was a warrior, battling against the same darkness that threatened his daughter. "Tell me everything you know," he said. "Every detail, every possibility. We'll use my resources, your knowledge, We'll find these people and we'll get Hamida back. Isabella nodded, but her expression remained troubled. There's something else you need to know. She pulled a worn notebook from her pocket. I've been keeping track of Hamida's episodes, comparing them to my sister's case. There's a pattern, but it's not what the doctors think. The episodes aren't random. They're responses to specific triggers, and they're getting worse because... A sudden noise from downstairs cut through the quiet house. They both froze, listening. Footsteps, too heavy to be Anjali's, too many to be just Hari. Someone's in the house, Isabella whispered. Bharat moved to the door, but Isabella caught his arm. Wait, she breathed, barely audible. There's a reason they came back. They must know I'm here, that I recognize the signs. They're not just after Hamida anymore. The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by the soft creak of someone testing each stair. Bharat's mind raced. The security system hadn't been triggered, which meant whoever was in his house knew the codes. This wasn't a random break-in. This was connected to Hamida's kidnapping. Isabella's grip on his arm tightened. In the darkness of the room, their eyes met, sharing the same realization. They were trapped, and the answers they both sought were approaching with each heavy footstep on the stairs. The hallway light flickered on, casting long shadows under the door. As the footsteps reached the landing, Bharat made a split-second decision that would alter the course of everything to come. He pulled Isabella into the ensuite bathroom, closing the door silently behind them. In the small space, they stood close enough that he could feel her rapid heartbeat matching his own. Outside, the bedroom door opened with a soft click. In the confined space of the bathroom, Bharat and Isabella held their breath as footsteps moved through Hamida's bedroom. The intruders were methodical, opening drawers and shifting furniture with practiced efficiency. They were looking for something. Isabella's hand found Bharat's in the darkness, squeezing it as she leaned close to whisper in his ear, her breath warm against his skin. Hamida's medical records. They're searching for my research notes. The realization hit Bharat like a physical blow. All this time, Isabella had been documenting something in that worn notebook of hers, something important enough that these people would break into his home to find it. A voice spoke from the bedroom, low and female, its accent distinctly American. Check the bathroom. Martinez always keeps her notes close. Isabella's grip on Bharat's hand tightened. They were trapped, with nowhere to go. The bathroom window was too small for escape, and they were 3 floors up. As the handle began to turn, Bharat made a decision. He pulled Isabella behind him just as the door opened, revealing a woman in dark clothing, her face familiar in a way that made his blood run cold. She was one of Hamida's former nurses, someone who had worked in their home briefly before disappearing without notice. Mr. Malhotra, she said, unsurprised. Step aside. We only want Martinez and her research. Sarah, Isabella spoke from behind him, her voice steady despite their situation. You're making a mistake. The treatment isn't ready. That's what I've been trying to tell them. The woman, Sarah, raised an eyebrow. And that's exactly why Dr. Richards wants your notes. You've been tracking the progression in multiple cases, haven't you? Following families, gathering data. She smiled coldly. Did you tell your employer here what you really are? A spy who infiltrates homes under the guise of domestic help. That's enough. Bharat's voice cut through the tension. Where is my daughter? Safe, Sarah replied, and she'll stay that way if you both cooperate. Dr. Richards is ready to begin the treatment. With Isabella's research, we can finally perfect it. The treatment killed my sister. Isabella's voice cracked with emotion. The cellular degeneration accelerated after each session. I've documented every case I could find. They all show the same pattern. If you start treating Hamida now, a male voice called from the bedroom. We need to move. Security patrol will be here in 10 minutes. Sarah's expression hardened. We're not leaving without those notes. She reached into her jacket, and the glint of metal made Bharat's heart stop. But before she could withdraw the weapon, a commotion erupted from downstairs. Police! Nobody move! The sound of multiple footsteps thundered up the stairs. Sarah's eyes widened in genuine surprise. This wasn't part of their plan. In the moment of confusion, Isabella moved with unexpected speed, shoving past Sarah and pulling Bharat with her into the bedroom. The male intruder was already heading for the window, but Isabella's voice stopped him. "Kevin, think about what you're doing. Remember Lisa? Your daughter showed the same symptoms, didn't she? That's why you joined Richards. But have you seen her results? The real ones?" Kevin hesitated, his face visible in the moonlight streaming through the window. He was younger than Bharat expected, with haunted eyes that spoke of personal tragedy. "Don't listen to her," Sarah snapped, emerging from the bathroom. "She's trying to destroy everything we've worked for." Isabella pulled her notebook from her pocket and held it out to Kevin. "See for yourself, page 47. Lisa's case progression, documented with timestamps and cellular imaging. Richards told you she was improving, didn't he? But look at the actual numbers." The police were getting closer, their voices clear now on the second floor. Kevin took a step toward Isabella, his hand reaching for the notebook. Sarah moved like lightning, her gun finally clearing her jacket. But she hadn't counted on Anjali, who appeared in the doorway with remarkable timing, swinging one of Hamida's heavy brass cricket trophies with surprising strength. The gun clattered to the floor as Sarah crumpled. Kevin raised his hands in surrender just as the police burst in, flooding the room with flashlight beams and shouted commands. In the chaos that followed, Bharat found himself unable to take his eyes off Isabella. She stood steady, answering the police's questions with calm authority, explaining about Dr. Richards' unauthorized medical experiments and his network of desperate parents willing to try anything to save their children. But it was only later, after the police had taken Sarah and Kevin away, after the house had been searched and secured, that Isabella finally broke down. Bharat found her in Hamida's room again, clutching her notebook and crying silently. He sat beside her on the small bed, surrounded by his daughter's stuffed animals and bright drawings. "You've been carrying this burden alone for too long," he said softly. Isabella wiped her eyes, opening the notebook with trembling hands. "After my sister died, I promised myself I wouldn't let it happen to another child. I started tracking cases, following leads. Richards' treatment looks promising at first. The episodes decrease. The children seem to improve, but the damage it causes." She turned page after page of careful notes, charts, and observations. "The cellular deterioration is catastrophic. He's killing them. Bharat, slowly but surely. And Hamida? Her case is different. The episodes, they're not just random neural misfires like Richards claims. They're her brain's way of protecting itself." Isabella turned to a fresh page of notes. "I noticed it the first week I was here. The episodes only happen when she's processing intense emotions. It's like her mind created a safety valve. That's why my humming worked. It gives her something else to focus on, helps her regulate." Bharat absorbed this information, thinking of all the times Hamida had disappeared into herself. "So she doesn't need treatment. She needs therapy, support, understanding." Isabella met his eyes. "She needs her father to know that she's not broken. She's just processing the world differently." The weight of this revelation settled over them both. Bharat thought of all the doctors, all the medications they'd tried, when what his daughter really needed was something much simpler and much more challenging. "We have to find her," he said. "Before Richard starts the treatment." Isabella nodded, her professional demeanor returning. "Sarah and Kevin will talk to the police. They have children of their own in the program. They'll want to protect them. But Richards is clever. He'll have multiple facilities, backup plans. Then we'll find them all." Bharat stood, offering her his hand. "Together." Isabella looked at his offered hand, then up at his face. In that moment, something shifted between them, a recognition that they were no longer employer and employee, but partners in something much more important. She took his hand and he pulled her to her feet. They stood close, the notebook pressed between them like a shared secret. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. "There's something else," Isabella said quietly. "Something I found in Hamida's medical history that you need to see. It's about your wife's accident." Before she could continue, Hari burst into the room, his face flushed with excitement. "Sir, we found something. One of the officers recognized Sarah from another case. They know where Richard's main facility is. Bharat and Isabella exchanged looks. Whatever revelation she had been about to share would have to wait. Right now, Hamida needed them. As they rushed to follow Hari, Bharat caught Isabella's arm. "When this is over, when Hamida is safe, we'll talk about everything. No more secrets." She nodded, but there was something in her eyes, a shadow of doubt or fear, that suggested the biggest secrets were yet to be revealed. The police convoy moved swiftly through the pre-dawn streets, with Bharat, Isabella and Hari following in a separate car. Isabella sat in the back, poring over her notebook under the glow of her phone light, while Bharat tried to focus on the road ahead rather than the growing knot of anxiety in his stomach. "Sire, something isn't right," Isabella muttered, flipping pages back and forth. "This is too easy." "What do you mean?" Bharat asked, catching her eye in the rearview mirror. "Richards is careful, methodical. He's been operating for years without detection. Why would Sarah and Kevin suddenly give up his location?" She leaned forward between the seats, her voice low and urgent. "And why take Hamida now? They've been watching her for weeks. I saw the signs. Why not wait until they had my research?" Bharat's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You think it's a trap?" "I think—" Isabella hesitated, glancing at Hari, who was unusually quiet in the passenger seat. "I think we need to consider why they really took her." The convoy turned onto a quiet industrial street lined with warehouses. The facility they were heading to was supposedly a private medical research center, operating under the guise of developing treatments for rare neurological conditions. Hari suddenly sat up straighter. "Sir, look." He pointed to a dark sedan parked half a block ahead. "That's Dr. Mehra's car." Bharat's blood ran cold. Dr. Mehra had been Hamida's neurologist since the episodes began, the one who had recommended all her medications and treatments. "Bas, are you sure?" "I drove him to your house enough times," Hari replied grimly. "I know his car." Isabella's breath caught. "Stop the car," she whispered urgently. "Bharat, stop now." He pulled over, killing the lights. Ahead, the police convoy continued toward the facility, unaware of their discovery. "Dr. Mehra was working with Richards all along," Isabella said, her voice shaking with anger. "The medications he prescribed, they weren't treating Hamida's condition. They were preparing her for Richard's experimental treatment, weakening her natural defenses." Bharat felt sick. He had trusted Mehra, followed his recommendations without question. All this time. "There's more," Isabella continued, her fingers tracing a page in her notebook. "The accident that killed your wife. It wasn't random, was it?" She had discovered something about Mehra's connection to Richards. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Bharat turned in his seat to face Isabella fully. "How did you—" "I found her emails," Isabella admitted. Hidden in Hamida's medical files, she had been investigating Mehra after noticing strange patterns in Hamida's blood work. The night of the accident, she had sent an email to a medical ethics board, but she never arrived at their office. Hari made a choked sound. "Sir, the night of the accident, Dr. Mehra had asked me to take a different route home. He said there was construction on the usual road." The implications hit Bharat like a physical blow. His wife's death, Hamida's suffering, all of it had been orchestrated, and Hari had unknowingly played a part. "They're not going to let us walk away from this," Isabella said softly. "Yeah, they've invested too much time, too many resources. Hamida isn't just another patient to them. She's proof that their treatment works." "But it doesn't work," Bharat argued. "You said yourself. They don't care about the long-term effects. They just need enough short-term success to secure funding and recognition. After that—" She didn't need to finish the thought. A sudden movement caught their attention. The door of Mehra's car opened, and a figure stepped out into the shadows. Through the pre-dawn gloom, they could make out the doctor's familiar silhouette as he walked toward the facility's side entrance. "We can't wait for the police," Bharat decided. "They're walking into a trap, and while they're dealing with that distraction, Richards will move Hamida to another facility," Isabella finished. "We need to find another way in," Hari spoke up, his voice heavy with determination to make amends for his unwitting role in their tragedy. "I know these buildings. They all connect through the basement level. It was a Cold War thing. If we can get into one of the adjacent buildings, Isabella was already pulling up a map on her phone. Here, she pointed to a smaller warehouse 2 buildings down. It looks abandoned, but there's fresh tire tracks outside. They're using it as a secondary entrance. Bharat studied both of them, his trusted driver seeking redemption, and the woman who had entered his life under false pretenses, but was now risking everything to save his daughter. In that moment, he knew their lives were irrevocably intertwined. Hurry, call Inspector Kumar. Tell him about Mera and the trap, but tell him to maintain the operation as planned. We need them to keep everyone distracted at the main entrance. As Hari made the call, Bharat turned to Isabella. You don't have to come. You've already risked enough. Isabella met his gaze steadily. Hamida isn't just another case to me anymore, neither are you. The weight of unspoken emotions hung between them. Besides, she added with a ghost of a smile, I'm the only one who knows what signs to look for if they've already started the treatment. The sound of sirens in the distance spurred them into action. As police vehicles began converging on the main facility, Bharat, Isabella and Hari slipped through the shadows toward the abandoned warehouse. The side door was locked, but Hari produced a set of tools that spoke of skills Bharat hadn't known his driver possessed. My father was a locksmith, he explained quietly as he worked. He always said knowledge was neither good nor bad. It depended on how you used it. The lock clicked open, and they slipped inside. The warehouse was dark and dusty, filled with old machinery and empty crates. But there, in the back corner, was a modern keypad next to an otherwise unremarkable door. Isabella pulled out her notebook one last time, flipping to a page filled with numbers. Medical facilities use standardized security protocols, she explained, punching in a code. Richards is careful, but he's also arrogant. He doesn't expect anyone to get this far. The keypad blinked green, and the door opened with a soft hiss, revealing a sterile white corridor that disappeared into the earth. As they stood on the threshold of whatever lay below, Bharat felt Isabella's hand slip into his. The simple touch carried so much: fear, determination, and something deeper that neither of them was ready to name. Whatever we find down there, she whispered, whatever Richards has done, remember that Hamida is stronger than they know. She's been fighting this battle her whole life. Bharat squeezed her hand once before letting go. Together, they descended into the fluorescent-lit unknown, while above them the sound of police sirens created the perfect cover for their rescue mission. But as they reached the bottom of the stairs, a familiar voice stopped them cold. I've been expecting you, Dr. Mera said, stepping out of the shadows. Though I must admit, you figured it out sooner than we anticipated. Behind him, through a window into a sterile room, they could see Hamida lying unconscious on a medical bed, surrounded by machines that beeped ominously in the silence. Dr. Mera stood before them, his familiar gentle demeanor now twisted into something cold and clinical. Through the window behind him, monitors beeped steadily beside Hamida's still form. The treatment has already begun, he said, his voice carrying the same soothing tone he'd used during countless appointments. In a few hours, she'll show remarkable improvement. All those episodes, all those disconnections from reality, they'll be gone, along with everything else that makes her who she is. Isabella stepped forward, her notebook clutched to her chest like a shield. I've seen your results, Mera. The cellular degradation, acceptable losses, another voice cut in. Dr. Richards emerged from a side door, tall and distinguished in his white coat. A small price to pay for normalcy. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Malhotra? After all, what father doesn't want his child to be normal? Bharat felt rage building inside him, but kept his voice steady. Where is your daughter, Dr. Richards? The question landed like a physical blow. Richards' confident expression faltered for just a moment, but it was enough. Isabella pressed the advantage. She was one of the first, wasn't she? That's why you're so desperate to prove the treatment works, to justify what you did to her. I saved her, Richards snapped. She was lost in her own mind, just like your sister, Miss Martinez, just like Hamida. The treatment brought her back. For how long? Isabella's voice was gentle now, almost sympathetic. Your research papers stopped tracking her progress after 6 months. Why is that? The silence that followed was deafening. Even Dr. Mehra looked uncertain, glancing between Richards and the window where Hamida lay. Show them, Isabella pressed. Show Dr. Mehra what happens after 6 months. Show him the brain scans, the cellular death, the way the patients start losing not just the episodes, but everything else too. Memory, personality, basic functions. It's been refined since then, Richards insisted, but his voice had lost its authority. The process is more stable now. Is it? Hari spoke up from behind them. Is that why you need Miss Isabella's research so badly? Because you're still killing children while trying to perfect your cure? Mehra's face had gone pale. The last round of tests. You said the tissue damage was minimal. It was. Richards turned on him. In the short term, we just need more time, more data. Martinez's research could be the key. She's found patterns we missed, variables we haven't considered. Because I was looking at the whole child, Isabella said quietly, not just the condition. These episodes, they're not the enemy. They're the mind's way of coping with overwhelming emotional input. Hamida doesn't need a cure. She needs understanding, support, the right kind of therapy. Lies. Richards moved suddenly, pulling something from his coat. The fluorescent lights glinted off metal, and Bharat's heart stopped. But the object in Richards' one hand wasn't a weapon. It was a syringe. One more dose, Richards said, moving toward the door to Hamida's room. One more treatment, and she'll be perfect. You'll see. They'll all see. David. The new voice came from the doorway behind them. A woman stood there, her hospital ID badge identifying her as Dr. Sarah Chen. She looked exhausted, her lab coat wrinkled as if she'd been wearing it for days. David, stop. Anna wouldn't want this. Richards froze at the name. Don't you dare speak of her. Your daughter loved you, Dr. Chen continued, stepping carefully into the room. Even at the end, when she couldn't remember her own name, she still smiled every time you walked into the room. That's what you're fighting to preserve, isn't it? That connection. But this, she gestured to Hamida's unconscious form, this isn't the way. The police are securing the building, she added gently. It's over. Don't make it worse. Richards looked at the syringe in his hand, then at Hamida through the window. For a moment, he seemed to age years before their eyes, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his failures. I just wanted to help them, he whispered, to give them normal lives. But their lives were already normal, Isabella said. Different, yes, challenging, absolutely, but normal for them. We're the ones who needed to change, to understand and adapt. She turned to Bharat. That's what your wife realized, wasn't it? That's why she was investigating Mehra. She saw that Hamida's episodes weren't the problem. Our response to them was. The sound of footsteps and voices echoed down the corridor. The police were getting closer. Dr. Mehra seemed to deflate, all his certainty evaporating in the face of what they'd done. I'll unlock the door, he said quietly, moving to the keypad beside Hamida's room. The treatment. It can be reversed if caught early enough. There's a protocol. I know, Isabella said. It's in my notes, along with everything else, all the cases, all the patterns, everything I've learned about helping these children thrive without destroying who they are. As the door slid open, Bharat rushed to his daughter's side. She looked so small among all the medical equipment, but her breathing was steady. When he took her hand, it was warm. Fatim, how soon can we start reversing the treatment? He asked, not taking his eyes off Hamida's face. Right away, Dr. Chen answered, already moving to the IV stand. I've been documenting everything, preparing for this moment. Between my records and Mrs. Martinez's research, we can help her. Help all of them. Richards made no move to stop her, the syringe now hanging limply at his side. When the police finally entered the room, he surrendered without resistance. As Mehra and Richards were led away in handcuffs, Isabella began working with Dr. Chen to disconnect Hamida from the machines. Their movements were swift and sure, their medical training evident in every gesture. Bharat watched them work, still holding his daughter's hand, feeling the faint squeeze of her fingers as she began to stir. Papa? Hamida's voice was weak but clear. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing first on him, then on Isabella. "I knew you'd come, both of you." Isabella paused in her work, tears gleaming in her eyes. "Always, sweetheart. We'll always come for you." The simple declaration carried the weight of a promise, not just to Hamida, but to all of them. As the first rays of dawn began to filter through the high windows of the facility, Bharat realized their journey was far from over, but now they would face it together, understanding that sometimes the greatest act of love is accepting people exactly as they are. Dr. Chen cleared her throat softly. "We should move her upstairs. There's a lot of work ahead, documenting everything, reaching out to other families, making sure this never happens again. And finding a better way," Isabella added, "a way that celebrates these children's unique perspectives, instead of trying to erase them." Hamida squeezed her father's hand again, stronger this time. "Can we go home now?" "Yes, Beta," Bharat answered, his voice thick with emotion. "But first, there's something I need to ask Isabella." He turned to the woman who had entered their lives as a housekeeper and become so much more. "Stay with us. Not as an employee, but as family," Hamida finished for him, smiling knowingly between them. Isabella looked at them both, her professional composure cracking to reveal the depth of her feelings. "Yes," she whispered, "yes to all of it." The gardens of the Malhotra mansion had changed with the seasons. Where once there had been perfectly manicured lawns and formal flower beds, now there was a wonderland of sensory experiences, wind chimes that tinkled softly in the breeze, aromatic herbs that released their scent when touched, and soft grass perfect for bare feet. Hamida sat cross-legged under the shade of a young neem tree, her fingers running through the grass as she explained complex mathematical equations to her friend from therapy group. Her episodes still came occasionally, but now they were understood not as problems to be fixed, but as parts of who she was, moments when her brilliant mind needed to step back and process. From the veranda, Bharat watched his daughter with pride, remembering how far they'd come. Dr. Chen's reversal protocol had worked perfectly, and with Isabella's research helping to guide Hamida's new therapy program, she was thriving in ways he'd never imagined possible. "She's teaching him her counting system," Isabella said softly, joining him at the railing. "The one she uses during her episodes to find her way back." Bharat turned to look at the woman who had changed their lives so completely. She'd traded her housekeeper's uniform for comfortable professional clothes, her notebook now replaced by a tablet where she tracked the progress of dozens of children in their new therapy program. The center they'd established together, using funds from Bharat's company and evidence from the Richards case, was helping families understand and support children with similar conditions. Dr. Chen had joined them as head of medical research, ensuring that their methods were both scientifically sound and deeply humane. Anjali called from the airport. Isabella continued, a smile playing at her lips. "She's insisting on cooking for the celebration dinner herself. She says my attempts at Indian cuisine are still too American." Bharat laughed, taking her hand. "She's just trying to maintain some control. You know how much she hated being wrong about you at first. And now? Now she tells everyone that she's the one who brought us together. I knew from the start, as she says, that this American girl would be perfect for my son and granddaughter." They shared a knowing look, remembering how far they'd come from those first suspicious days. Their relationship had grown slowly, naturally, built on a foundation of shared purpose and deep understanding. "I have something for you," Bharat said, reaching into his pocket. Instead of the expected ring box, he pulled out a familiar, worn notebook. Isabella's breath caught. "My research journal, but I thought it was still in police evidence. They released it last week, after Richards' sentencing, but before I give it back." He opened it to a blank page near the end. "I think there's one more case study that needs to be documented. Ours." Tears welled in Isabella's eyes as she read what he had written. "Case study, love as a healing protocol, subjects, one workaholic father, one undercover researcher, one extraordinary child method. Replace fear with understanding, isolation with connection, and judgment with acceptance. Results: family found, hearts healed, lives transformed. Conclusion: some conditions don't need to be cured. They just need to be loved." Bharat, she whispered, but he wasn't finished. I'm not asking you to stop being who you are, the researcher, the advocate, the protector of children who see the world differently. I'm asking you to be all of that, and also my wife, Hamida's mother, our family's heart. From under the neem tree, Hamida's voice called out, "Say yes already! Some of us have been waiting forever." They turned to find not just Hamida watching, but Hari too, who had emerged from the house with a camera ready. Behind him, Dr. Chen stood with several children from their therapy program and their families, all gathered for what they'd thought was just a regular community dinner. "You planned this," Isabella accused, laughing through her tears. "We all did," Hamida said, running up to hug them both. "Even Nani helped, and she's still on the plane." Isabella looked at her journal, then at the family before her, not just Bharat and Hamida, but all of them. The children they helped, the parents they supported, the community they'd built together. Her research had started as a mission of justice for her sister, but it had led her to something she'd never expected to find, a home. "Yes," she said simply, and the garden erupted in cheers. Later that evening, as their extended family celebrated around them, Bharat found Isabella sitting with Hamida under the neem tree. They were both quiet, comfortable in one of Hamida's processing moments, their hands moving in the patterns they used to ground themselves. He sat down with them, adding his own hands to their dance. He'd learned the patterns too, not because he needed them, but because understanding them helped him understand the people he loved. "Papa," Hamida said softly, coming back to them in her own time, "I remember what you told me about Mama, about how she knew I was perfect just as I was. Do you think she would be happy now?" Bharat looked at his daughter, so wise and wonderful in her unique way of seeing the world. Then at Isabella, who had risked everything to protect that uniqueness. His heart felt full enough to burst. "Yes, Beta," he said. "I think she brought Isabella to us. I think she knew that sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about changing people, but about finding those who see the beauty in who we already are." Above them, the wind chimes sang their gentle song as the sun set on their garden sanctuary. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more children to help, more minds to change, more love to give. But they would face it all together, a family built not by convention, but by choice, by understanding, by acceptance. And in the end, that was the greatest cure of all. Thank you for watching this heart-stirring story. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below telling me what you thought of the story. Also, click on the video appearing on your screen to continue the journey with us. See you in the next story.